Hello and welcome to Tobisonics. It is Tuesday, the 6th of April, 2021. I hope you all had a very happy Easter weekend and that the chocolate was binged successfully. In today's episode, we're picking up from where we left off last time. It's part 2 of adding width, depth, and dynamics to loops with simple production techniques. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the hi-hat and the synth. In last week's episode, we worked on the bass, kick, and snare. If you haven't seen it and you'd like to, click on the link above. Before we get into it, if you could just take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be a great help. Thank you for taking the time. Next up are a pair of hi-hats that we use Loop Cloud to drop an octave down and an octave up. Right now, we've just got the raw loops as they came in from Loop Cloud. Let's see what we can do with them. So here we go, first off with the octave down hi-hat. And you can see we've just got a Pro Q on there, no track control. And all it's doing is taking out some of those lows and just taming the high. Then we've got an octave up hi-hat. And we've got a track control on there, and we're doing a little bit with that. You can see we're increasing the whip, so we're just expanding the stereo image just that little bit by 15% there. And then we're doing a little bit with the mid and side options. We're actually reducing the mid signal by 33%. That's just giving a little bit more room to the kick snare, to the bass, to things like that. And then we're pushing the sides 33%, so we're giving it that little bit more width. And then we've got the old tried and true, the Pro Q. We're taking out even more lows on this one, and then we're just taming the high frequencies a touch. Let's do as we did before. Let's start off with just the raw loops, and then I'll bring in the effects. But we're not quite done with the hi-hat. It's a little bit dull at the moment and it sounds a little bit stacked in the stereo field. So we're going to use a little bit of automation to introduce some dynamics and some movement in the left-right. We're going to automate the left-right swap on the track control. And we're going to do it on both the low hat and the hi-hat. And to make things more dynamic, we're going to alternate that swap. So you can see here on the low hat that when the swap is on the hi-hat, it's off. When it's on the hi-hat, it's off on the low hat. Let's do as we did before. We'll start with the automation in bypass, and then I'll bring them in, starting with the auto on the low hat, and then I'll bring in the auto on the hi-hat so you can hear the difference. All right, let's move on to the synth. And the way that I'm going to use this in the production is I'm going to A-B it with the guitar bass. So we're not going to have them playing at the same time for the time being. We're going to have them playing one off each other. Here we go right now. We've just got the dry loop as it came in with Loop Cloud. First up, we've got the track control, and we're just doing a little bit of mid and side work. We're dropping the mid out by 25%. That's just going to give a little bit more room and definition to that kick snare and to the bass. And then we're just pushing the sides by 25%. That's just going to give us a little bit more stereo. Not too much. It's not a big difference. And then next up, we've got ourselves the Pro Q3, and here we are. We're high passing at C#4, and we're doing that just to clean out the lows for the kick and also for the low weight on the snare. So it's just going to help those drums have a bit more presence and weight in the mix. And then here we go. We just tame the top here, C#10. Like we did with the bass and the drums, when I brought the synth in from Loop Cloud, I also got it to do an octave dub, but I only did an octave up. I wasn't interested in introducing a low dub. That would have just muddied up the mix. I didn't need that, but I wanted to get a little bit more height and some width with a high dub. Now you can see that the high dub is muted. And then we've got a little bit of processing going on as well. We've got ourselves a track control and a Pro Cue. And with the track control, I'm adding a little bit of width to the stereo in total. I'm just 5%, just spreading the stereo just a little bit more. I'm dropping that mid down, minus 25%, like I did before. But on the pan, instead of just pushing it 25%, I'm pushing it 33%. So I'm pushing it that little bit wider to the side. It's not huge differences, but it's just enough to keep building an extra little bit of width with it. Moving on to the Pro Cue, you can see we're on a linear phase, and you can see that we're actually high passing lower than we did with the lower octave. Now, I wouldn't usually do it this way, but I really like the texture it brought in by doing this. It's a really interesting effect. And there we go. We've got the high pass right up there, just taming those high frequencies, just helping them sit that little bit nicer in the production. Let's do like we did before. Let's start off with just the standard loop. Then I'll bring in the high octave. Then I'll bring the track control in. And then I'll bring the Pro Cue. Here we have our standard kick snare loop running. We've got our octave up and octave down dubs going, and we've got our reverbs going, just as we have it when the bass line is running. But now we've got the synth going. I want to introduce a little bit of contrast into the drums. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So we've got a couple of things going on here. The first thing I've done is I've duplicated the kick reverb, and I've gone in and I've done a little bit of editing. And you can see what I've done is I've cut out the kicks that land immediately before a snare hit. The reason I've done that is because I'm going to add in Echo Boy and add a little bit of a delay to the kick. And I want to do that to give it some depth, but I don't want it to kind of muddy up or fudge up the snare hit. So I'm only hitting it where we've got a kick and then a little bit of space. Next up, we've got our snare reverb. And we're going to do a little bit of auto. At the moment, we've got a FabFilter Pro G gate sat on the reverb, and that's just sort of tidying up the sustain and making the snare hit and making the snare reverb that little bit cleaner so it keeps the production nice and tight, nice and clean. But when the synth comes in, I don't really want the gate there. I want a little bit more sustain on my snare hit. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to automate the threshold down to minus 60 dB, so the gate is basically not doing anything. And finally, we've got ourselves an old school mixing trick. We've got ourselves a little bit of pink noise. So I've duplicated the signal chain for the snare verb, and I've got a test generator creating pink noise. Now, whatever DAW you've got, you're almost certainly going to have something that will do this for you. That pink noise is then gated, and those gates are sidechained to the snare itself. So the snare is controlling when the pink verb sounds and when it doesn't. Let's do as we've done before. We'll start off with a kick snare pattern as it is when the bass guitar is running, and then I'll bring in each of the processing one by one, starting with the kick echo. Alright then, before we sum up, let's go through what we've done. So here we are, we're starting off, we've just got the raw loops as they came in from Loop Cloud, and we're starting off with just the bass guitar loop. What I'll do then is I'm going to bring in the processing, the dubs, the automation one by one. And then once we've got the bass guitar loop going, I'll expand the loop out so it includes the synth part, and we'll add the dubs, the processing, and the automation to that as well. there we have it. We introduced some depth, some width, some dynamics with just a few simple production techniques that you could apply on any DAW. If you found this week's episode useful, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to my channel. That would be a great help. Thank you for taking the time. If you have any questions about the production techniques that I used in this episode, feel free to ask me in the comments below, or you can contact me on social media at Tobisonics. Thank you for watching. Till next Tuesday, good night and good noise. Stay safe and stay healthy.